So welcome to Wemcast. Welcome everyone to Wemcast, another episode with me and Eoin Walker. I'm here today with a colleague and friend of Wem's, Andy Elwood. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, thanks very much. Pleasure to be here.
Good man, good man. So Andy, just for the audience, could you just maybe describe a little bit of your background and what you do for a living?
So I've just completed 20 years in the emergency services. I started in the ambulance service in Northern Ireland, where I picked up this accent, and I progressed into helicopter medicine, search and rescue with the Air Force, with the Coast Guard, and I became a paramedic with the Air Force. I've also spent time out on the Afghanistan battlefields on the rescue helicopter with the Air Force out there as a paramedic as well. Throughout my career, it's helped me to talk various times about the emotions I've had, issues I've had on particular call-outs and other challenges in life. And I'd started to share that experience, encourage others to do that over the last number of years. And I've got to a stage where I think I'm going to save more lives now, focusing on mental health first aid rather than physical first aid. So I've become a mental health first aid instructor and campaigner.
Fantastic, Andy. That's absolutely fantastic. So you started off in a military background, and Andy, within that military background, did that see you attached to a specific unit? So what speciality were you involved in within the military?
So with the Air Force, it's probably the least military part of the military, the Air Force, and search and rescue within that, but I'm keeping my voice down. So I'd be used to peacetime running around in red Gore-Tex and yellow flying helmet. I was predominantly based in Scotland, but I've worked in search and rescue helicopters all over the world. So it's rescuing people in extreme conditions, really suits with WEM. So whether they're in the sea, drowning, whether they're on a ship far out at sea, usually in extreme weather in the remote mountains, remote medicine. Often you'd be the first person on scene as well, especially up in Scotland. So it was fantastically challenging. I'm an outdoors person myself. I love the outdoors. So it's a very challenging environment as a clinician, but also from surviving the environment yourself. So I'd be part of a close-knit team on search and rescue helicopters. And then I suppose specialised within that out to the MERT helicopter during the Afghanistan conflict.
Gosh, okay, yeah. So real cross section of experience, actually. That which is fantastic. Now, my next question related to that, Andy, would be, which did you find more traumatic and/or challenging in that aeromedical retrieval stroke primary work capacity? Was it the MERT stuff, or was it the search and rescue?
So the MERT is the short answer. So I upskilled, increased my confidence through that period. Absolutely brilliant sense of satisfaction working with amazing colleagues, seeing polytrauma on a daily basis, multiple casualty incidents. So it was just a fantastic experience, made a real contribution. I volunteered to go out there, fantastic to be selected, but without a doubt, the most horrific experience of my life. And certainly for me, the period that we're going through at the moment with clinicians dealing with COVID, some people don't seem to like the war, battle, enemy kind of language that's being used. But for me, I can really equate to people putting on their PPE as opposed to body armor, going into very challenging circumstances. And I'm sure there's a lot of, from the people I've spoken to on the front line at the minute, there's a lot of similar fear and anxiety going around at the minute for personal safety as well as family at home and obviously patients. So there's a lot of similarities to draw. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think so.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy, absolutely. Just doing 6 clinical shifts just having finished this morning at 6:30, actually, having to don PPE for all the cardiac arrests actually is extremely difficult. Like you said, akin to maybe wearing body armor in Afghanistan, where the conditions are hot. It muffles your sense of your proprioception, so your sense of hearing, your sense of visual perception, and all your communication facets become a lot more stunted. And I feel that in myself, actually. So it really does make a difficult situation all the more challenging, actually. And I probably very much so for yourself, Andy. Just doing a slight deep dive into the MERT experience that because you're being really are being parachuted or flown into some very stressful high acuity situations whereby there's life and death right in front of your face. Have you got any that stick in your mind that really that you either really succinctly learned from, or indeed just really made you think, gosh, this is really almost too much at certain points?
So there's lots and lots of them. The first job I did by myself was to a patient in a minefield. And as the paramedic on that aircraft, you'd be the only clinician getting off the aircraft to triage casualties, decide who was coming with you, and which order they get loaded on the aircraft for treatment back to the hospital. And there's a lot of fear involved, a lot of adrenaline to get off the aircraft into that very different environment, and not being on headset. Arriving there, not having the full information, your eyes, ears, everything's out on stocks, trying to look after your own safety and discern what's going on very quickly. And I just couldn't see in this first call where the casualty was. It was a very confusing picture. There was vehicles moving, people moving. And I thought, I've got to get off this aircraft and show some courage and commitment. And I had one foot off, still holding on to the on the ramp, and I thought, this is really confusing. I'm just going to pause. This is a minefield situation. I'm just going to wait here. I'm safe here. And it was one of the best things I did. And I just learned that, there's a lot of adrenaline pumping. You're the most important person in every situation. What's the first thing in the DRABC? Danger. You got to look after yourself. And that really put me in good stead for the rest of my detachment. Just not to rush into things. Well, there's multiple cases that from debriefs afterwards you learn, and I think that's an important thing now. It's a fast moving situation, and the number of casualties, as we've just discussed in the preamble before we press record, is just phenomenal. It's really akin to a war situation. So I think our mindset and our triage and just dealing with casualties, but then dealing with the amount of deaths clinicians will be dealing with as well. There's a lot of similarities, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. So there's a lot to unpick actually from what you were just saying around recognizing your own mortality and also fragility in such high acuity situations. So let's just pick that one out. There's a few other things about listening first as well, which I'll come back to, because I think you illustrate that in some of your teaching, which I think is powerful as well. But let's just come back to your own self-care, because I think self-care is a fundamental prerequisite of this whole healthcare piece at the moment. So you realized in your military experience that self-care was key. And then that extrapolated out forward. Just did you see a lot of self-care in the military, or did you see a lot of guys not necessarily looking after themselves and or their own mental health? Did you manage? I know you came to that revelation. Did others around you, or was it not necessarily as apparent?
I think the environment I'm from, and being 4 people in a helicopter, 2 pilots up the front facing out the front, and 2 guys in the back, the clinicians, something akin to an EMT and a paramedic. And there'd be a lot of communication between the 2 guys in the back without actually saying something on intercom, with looks, nods, hands on shoulder, knowing looks as to what we've been through together. So there's a lot of things passed without being said. I think things have changed over the number of years, and are improving slowly. We're breaking down that stigma about talking about it. From the aviation background, with the human factors, we're really good at debriefing after a job, learning, but just sharing some feelings. If it was particularly tough, if something really struck a chord with you, that's a really good time to just start talking about it, get it off your chest, and finding some empathy. We're not alone. That's what I found in this. We're in a caring profession. We care about other people. We're wanting to help them. So we are sensitive and this at the moment, COVID is reaching out to us all our family members, ourselves, particularly if we have someone vulnerable in our close-knit circle of family and friends. So just sharing how you're feeling there. What the military were particularly good at was keeping everyone right with the basics. And a lot of us are well. It's no accident that we're well and keeping well with their mental and physical health. So, meals were provided out there. Sleep was difficult, but there was somewhere to sleep. Your laundry was taken care of. There was somewhere to wash. And there was people around. There was a routine. In a way, that's more difficult at the moment, particularly with the rest of the country in lockdown, because people coming home working shifts, it's a very different home situation. There's maybe more people in the home than normal. So it's more difficult than actually people like me being deployed overseas and having things taken care of. People are coming back from maybe a really traumatic shift, totally out of the ordinary to what they're used to, and then they're coming home to homeschooling, having to cook meals. There's maybe an office on the kitchen table where someone else is working from home. So it's just a crazy situation at the minute. There is so much going on. So if people can build in some routine, do the basic things well. So I try to promote the 5 ways of well-being. It's like your 5 a day for mental health. And that's connecting with other people. So we're blessed now having all these devices and the intranet. So connect with the people you're in lockdown with, but connect with other people as well. We're not designed to be lone beings. We're very social creatures, humans, aren't we? Being active. So, a key part of the government strategy is you're allowed out for an hour a day, exercise from home. That exercise is crucial to get you away from the cabin fever, but to keep your body working well, help your digestion, release some endorphins, do what works for you. Take notice while you're out there. Do you have a mindful practice? Do you know much about mindfulness?
That's a question to me, actually. I was just agreeing with you. So I do. I certainly do. I meditate in the morning times, and that just involves focusing on my breath, being hyper vigilant, and also acutely aware of my physiological state. So am I carrying any stress in my body? Am I carrying anything in my mind which is residual from the day before and or the same day? So I very much agree with you on that one, because unless you stop, hit pause, and understand what's going on in your subconscious under the surface, then you will never fully, unless you do that, you'll never fully understand how it bleeds into your consciousness and or maybe affects your reality. And so I'm an absolute big believer in that. So listen, that's absolutely fantastic, Andy. So let's just really, deep dive on that, because I think this is really important, actually. The fundamental bases, because we're talking about bases, aren't we, here, and covering your base as well. So you're understanding your need for community, which I think is key, because we are innately social beings, and I very much know I am. I think everyone is, and actually we need that. Having a mindful practice, getting good sleep, and good rest. Is nutrition another one? Did you say is that one alone, or?
It's actually not. It's one I would add in, actually, and the sleep isn't one of them either. Particularly difficult for people working shifts, but crucially important. And research is showing that more and more. I attended a research symposium at King's College earlier in the year, and interestingly, other corporate organisations, people open up and they'll talk about their mental health or their stress. Emergency and pre-hospital clinicians don't. What they tend to open up first about is they're having difficulty sleeping. So whether they're sleeping too much, their sleep is interrupted, they can't get to sleep. So if you're experiencing that yourself at the moment, just realize that it's maybe worth checking in what is going on. You having a regular mindful practice in the morning is fantastic, really ideal for that. Check in if something's residual, like you say, how you're feeling. We need to be flexible and kind and gentle with ourselves and others at this time, because there's so much change. But sleep is proven. So if you're feeling your sleep is disrupted, just think about putting some effort into improving your sleep. So having good sleep hygiene as much as possible at the moment. Have a room at a good temperature, try and reduce the clutter there, reduce your screen time before bed, and just gradually relax down, get rid of the day and what all's happened before you go to sleep for a good nice rest. It's key to your performance for your next shift. Nutrition, absolutely key. We all, especially you're wearing extra PPE, hydrating and drinking water is probably one of the key things. Eating well, your fresh fruit and veg, have plenty of colours on your plate. That's great at the moment and key. And doing those basics right will keep us in this for the marathon. It is a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it? So if we look after ourselves first, it's almost like putting your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. If you're well, your family, your patients, your clinical team you'll perform better there. Absolutely. And could I say a bit more on the mindfulness? Because a lot of men particularly think that's a bit hippie, that's not for me, I don't need to sit and burn incense. There's loads of ways you can find mindfulness, and it can be a little break during the day for you. Maybe as you're reading something, I start my day mindfully making a first espresso on the stove, and just smell the coffee that's there, feel the machine, just use all my senses and just check in for the day. And I can sneak in a couple of sun salutations while that's brewing on the stovetop as well, just to stretch out. That's what our pets tend to do. Our pets don't turn on their phone and get all the bad news. As soon as they wake up, first thing in the morning, they'll have a stretch, something to drink, and then go outside probably and get some fresh air. Good advice for us as well.
Absolutely, Andy. Absolutely. I really agree with all you said there, and just covering your bases of self-care on a daily basis, because as you quite rightly said, there's enough deficit of compassion fatigue and your time commitment throughout the day, certainly coming from 6-12 hour shifts, days and nights, that chronic fatigue, and if the self-care component isn't there, you can't give to others if you've not got it yourself. Even so, just bringing this down to really basic terms, it was 4 a.m. this morning. Of this morning, I was in PPE treating a cardiac arrest patient, and I nearly snapped at a colleague at work for over a very simple thing, and actually managed to catch myself before I did that, actually. And it's only because of fatigue. Actually, I haven't been sleeping well on nights. It's really difficult in PPE. You feel completely muzzled. Well, you literally are, because you're wearing a FP3 mask. And managed to catch myself and de-escalate myself and just and smooth the surfaces, and it actually went a lot better as a result. But could see very much in my animalistic brain, for when the human factors start to play out, you're so much closer to your emotions, and so much closer to being robbed by your emotions as well. And I managed to catch myself at that point this morning, but don't always. But you're right. Unless you're hopefully self-aware enough to know that's coming out in you, or just about to, you can't. I've plenty of times reacted and thought, oh, that was probably a bad idea, actually. And it negatively affects the scene going forward.
Yeah, but we're all just human, aren't we? And there's been a great checklist popped out by the Clinical Human Factors Group. I don't know if you've seen that, but a couple of great points to share with listeners, viewers, I think, on that is really, if you can introduce yourselves to the team before you don PPE, just check in with everyone. If you don't know the team you're working with and what your skills are, what your specialities. And I'd add to that something I learned from midwives I did some human factors training with a while ago, and they have a huddle at the start of a shift, and they go through what's happening in the day, what's important stuff work-wise, and if there's not too much to talk about, then they have a cuddle. And that's really, how are you feeling, what's going on for you, because we all try to be professional, leave our personal circumstances at home, when we come into work, be professional. There's so much extra stuff going on at the moment, and I'd encourage everyone to be open with their team if there's something particularly stressful going on for you at home, and people maybe just be flexible, be kind to you, and give you a little bit more space and patience and room. And if we can all do that for each other, I think that'll really help us get through this period as well.
Yeah, and I really agree. Absolutely. So one thing, let's just visit from a toolkit approach. I think that's fantastic. Just from another aspect, from something I know you advocate a lot of, let's just deconstruct the power of listening, because I think listening is a fundamental prerequisite of communication. I think it's probably one of the most powerful tools. How did you come to that revelation, and what does it mean to you, Andy?
I think it's massively important in comms, and probably the most underused and underutilized. So from a mental health first aid point of view, the key thing is non-judgmental listening. So try and put yourself in someone else's shoes. So we don't know what this relative of the patient has been going through and dealing with. Let's listen. Let's not pass any judgment on them. And that just allows them to express their emotion, get rid of that, and feel heard and understood, which is a key part of being human. And just listening. And we don't have to fix anyone. Listening is so powerful without offering advice. Just spending time with someone, that is a massive thing to give, and just listen. I cannot believe the power in that over the last number of years, as I've done more and more of this. Just listening to someone and giving them an outlet for how they're feeling, what's going on for them, can really turn their life around. And I know that's made a massive difference for me 3 times in my life. So I'd encourage people to talk if they've got a lot going on for them, their emotions, their mental state at the moment. talk to someone they feel they can trust. I think that's very important. And if you can create that safety and trust for someone else who wants to talk or seems to be having a difficulty, so getting in a quiet space, getting rid of distractions, and sitting down and just really being with that person and listening.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it's a couple of things you said there about building safety and trust, actually, Andy. Just the power of sitting down, and that sounds really bizarre to say that, but as you mentioned, sitting down, I think what that does is it in a non-verbal way gives a person the indication and message that you are solely there for them and you're solely listening to them, because it might be the same 5 minutes as if you were standing up, but actually the process of sitting down gives that person the non-verbal cues that you are there to listen, and you're not there to shoot off or make a quick exit. You're there to be there for them, because I think your non-verbal communication speaks louder than your verbal communication does. So yeah, I think the components of a great clinician are controlling your non-verbal communication in a way as well. And what I will do, just to your point, Andy, actually, is reiterate the message which is brought back to me. So hopefully, just as I've done there, I've listened to what you've said and I've reiterated part of your answer, but that shows you that I've actually listened to your answer. And I would do that as a clinician. I'd do that also to de-escalate difficult circumstances, maybe with the patient's relative. Whereas, and again, this harks back to the power of agreement, but what it does is it shows them that I'm taking their message on board by reiterating their message back to them. And it's almost a form of closed loop communication, but what that does is builds rapport and shows them that I'm taking on board their points, which to your point, I think is very powerful, because you're right, sometimes people don't need the situation to be fixed, they just want to be heard. Quite often, and you're as a fellow paramedic, I fully have been there where you are. Sometimes you can't fix the situation. Sometimes the situation can't be fixed. A lot of times, working within critical care, a lot of work is palliative, and especially in the current climate, every COVID patient I've been to this last weekend has been in asystolic cardiac arrest. We haven't got any of those patients back. It's in the mix of another caseload as well. Some patients we have got back from heart attacks, but those patients specifically we haven't. And so in this pandemic, coming to terms with the fact that actually you might not be able to fix the situation to what you said, Andy, but actually letting people feel like they've been heard and processed the information is I think is a powerful tool.
I think absolutely, and that's going to be more of a key role for clinicians going forward. But what I'd worried about, and from personal experience, is how are you dealing? How are other clinicians listening to this, watching this, dealing with the increase in numbers and them absorbing all these feelings, emotions, frustration, anger from relatives? And if you are listening well and showing empathy, it's very easy to absorb a lot of this and take it home with you. And so having some way to offload that is really important. So your exercise will be one good way of getting rid of that. If you can sleep well, that helps us process all the things we've been through and form a memory that we can deal with and access in the future. So if you're with a team, just having a debrief after cases or at the end of shift. Have you seen the end of shift checklist that's been put out by Mind and NHS places? Have you seen that at all or used that?
I have actually. I have seen it. So Andy, can you just briefly take it? Could you, if you can recall it, can you just notion towards it slightly? Because I think this is really powerful actually, and it's a powerful part of letting things go throughout the day and releasing the day. But yeah, just expand on that if you wouldn't mind, because that's really powerful.
yeah, so the key things for me, I love checklists, and coming from an aviation background and having an interest in human factors. So it's the end of your shift, and a lot of guys I know have this in their locker to remind them before they go home. It's drawing a line under the shift. So was there one difficult thing in the shift that you can think about? Try and let that go. If there's 3 things that went well on the shift, think about those, focus on those, have some gratitude for those. That's great. And it's really trying to draw a line under the shift and then focus about going home, looking forward to that time, what's at home for you, switching off from work and looking forward rather than back. How am I going to use that time to relax and really recharge? So for me, resilience it's not about enduring this crisis. It's about recharging yourself. So when your phone gets low, we recharge it. It's the same for ourselves. So that's really exercise, sleep. I keep repeating myself. It's the simple things that work and keep the body and the individual going. Simple key building blocks work. Having an interest and a hobby is really important. Don't let those slip as much as you can through this period. So whether that's reading, if that's your running, cycling, jigsawing, your mindfulness, those things, it just takes away all the stresses, worries, thoughts of the horrific stuff that you have been doing. And make no mistake, at the minute, clinicians are dealing with extraordinary events every day in a cumulative fashion, which is we've never seen before. It really is akin to battlefield and war kind of levels of numbers. So whatever people are experiencing, it's a normal human reaction to a set of extraordinary events, and just put that in perspective, and that just be kind to yourself. So I've got a bit off topic there, didn't I?
It's fine. It's absolutely fine, actually, Andy. So let's just because we can just come straight back to it. So you finished your military experience, and one of the key fundamentals you talk about is the power of vulnerability, just being vulnerable and accessing people through vulnerability. But could you just explain, how you really got into the mental health first aid? Because I'd like to explore the course itself and the utility of the course. But so you came out of the military, and what was the journey of sort of self-discovery into the sort of power of this of mental health first aid?
Wow. I suppose it crept up on me over time rather than being one event. So there's 3 major events, I suppose, in my life or in my career. So I dealt with a guy with serious head injury when I was relatively new in search and rescue, despite me realizing that there was a real danger of him vomiting and me trying to protect myself. Loaded him onto the aircraft. It was out in the North Sea. Loading him onto the aircraft, he vomited blood into my eyes and mouth. So, and there was other parts of that case and behaviours that he exhibited that were really difficult for me leading on from that. But I was really worried how that would affect the rest of my life, my career, my relationship with my wife then, if I was infected with something. So I was offered the chance to see a psychiatrist through the Air Force because I was getting blood tests done. The GP said, "Why don't you go and see this psychiatrist?" And the stigma that was involved with that, for me, I thought, am I losing it? Does the doc think I'm losing it? What's going on? Is this the end of my flying career? Is this the end of my career, full stop? Will this be the end of my marriage? What will the lads back at work say if I go and see the shrink? It's so much stigma around that. But I decided to go, and he was just a normal chap, very welcoming. There was no couch in sight. He made me a brew. We sat down, had a chat, and he made me realise that actually what I was experiencing and the fear and anxiety was, just like I've said, a normal reaction to an extraordinary event. So that was the first thing. And just like that, I was cured, totally happy, was able to get a perspective on things, cured in inverted commas. Got back to work, loved it. 5 years after I was in Afghanistan, I was on holiday, and in France, we were going for a day in the Alps in the summer. Just jumped in the shower and had a flashback to a patient trapped in a Land Rover after an IED attack out in Afghanistan. And it was so vivid. I could feel the body armor on me. I could feel the temperature of the day. I could feel the sand on my skin, and just the pressure to save this guy's life and the threat to my own life as well. That day, I thought I was going to be left on the battlefield by the aircraft. So after that, I scrubbed and scrubbed at my skin. I turned the water on cold, tried to cool down, nothing working. Had to escape, get out of there, and out of the shower. And I was on top of my wife in this tiny apartment in the Alps before I knew it. And she knew straight away something was wrong. So I had to decide again, am I going to talk about this or not? And that she was not the person that I would have talked to about this kind of thing. I think a lot of paramedics, especially pre-hospital clinicians, they think, I need to speak to someone who's been through something like this, that they'll understand it. But there was no one else there. I was in a different country. My wife and I had the safety and trust. So I decided I would talk to her about what had happened despite my fears, talking to her about it, what it might mean. And we tend to catastrophize, don't we? We tend to think, if I just admit this chink in my armor, that I've had this thought, this experience, this is going to mean I'm going to lose my job. My wife isn't going to love me anymore. This is the end of everything I know. And it's very easy to catastrophize and get down that route. So by talking to her that day, she listened. She didn't judge me. She sat down and listened, let me talk about it. And she didn't judge me at all. And it was great. I just was able to offload, feel a bit better, get rid of those emotions. And it wasn't the cure like this from seeing the psychiatrist, but I did feel an awful lot better. And she did a wonderful job that day by not judging me. She's judged me plenty of times since. But that day when it really mattered, she was absolutely fantastic. So those experiences really led me to realize that we can have blips in life. We can and still function. Just because you were brave doesn't mean you weren't afraid. I have got off the back of that Chinook so many days. I was absolutely terrified. You know, when the loadmaster at the back gives you the thumbs down where the enemy is, you're normally getting it in one direction. But when he's circling around, you're surrounded and you're getting off. Like, that is scary bananas. And I just imagine that's almost what it's like, people going to work now, suiting up with their PPE and thinking, what's going to happen today? I'm doing another one of those. It really lines up quite similarly in my head. You know, I stand to be corrected. You're doing it right now, but fear and anxiety levels must be rising for everyone. The cumulative effect of the sheer numbers involved is just having a massive effect in everyone. So if we can have these simple building blocks to help us do the simple things well, will keep us functioning and carry ourselves through this.
Yeah. And yeah, so listen, I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. You know, having been to some horrendous cardiac arrest this last weekend, but also just actually looking at the mental health of the population. So went to a terrible case last night where a young chap hung himself and was cut down by his friends, and we're unfortunately not able to save him. And there was an underlying mental health issue there, but from social isolation, he had proceeded to take his own life. And I think what we're seeing a lot of, I'm seeing it a lot as a paramedic, is not necessarily just underlying mental health conditions, but just the social isolation really bringing out a groundswell of mental health issues. Actually, it was horrific to, and it always is actually. But I'm actually seeing a lot more of that. So it's not just the issue of COVID-19. There's a groundswell of mental health which comes from social isolation. And did you find? It sounds like you found a release from that, as you weren't necessarily isolating those thoughts, but really bringing them in front of other people and exposing them. You could then go on and release that. And is that a fundamental prerequisite of the mental health first aid? Is that vulnerability and trust to release that information to other people?
I think the key point with that is being there and to listen. So encouraging people to talk. It's okay to talk. I will listen. If you choose to open up to me, I won't judge you. It's just so that you don't feel alone. I think you're absolutely right. COVID-19 isn't the cause of all the issues that's going on at the minute, but it's just exacerbating things, increasing the intensity of other feelings. And the isolation is a massive part of that. So again, the connection that we talked about, keeping that going for yourself. But if there's people you haven't heard from for a while that you're maybe worried about, please make an effort and contact them. Think about a video call, think about a phone call rather than just a text. But we can't force people to open up and talk, but just showing up in a non-judgmental way, in a supportive way, is the best thing we can do. Offering safety and trust should that person choose to open up. Not feeling alone will take a load off for a lot of people. And just you mentioned the suicide last night. There's a lot of stigma around suicide. It's a massive part of the mental health first aid course, and it's really my main motivator for changing my career. I couldn't believe as a paramedic in 2016, I discovered the #1 killer of men under 50 in the UK was suicide. I could not believe it. And I mean, it's predominantly male workforce that I've spent my life in the military and in the Coast Guard as well. Big hairy fellas doing lots of macho stuff and not talking about it. And talking has really helped me. And the people that I share my story with and do the courses with, the message I'm getting back is, I wish we had something like this 20 years ago. If we'd had something like this and it was okay to talk about these things, we wouldn't have all the issues that we have. It's often the person who leaves a friendship group through suicide. It's the last person we think of. People are very good at putting on a mask and acting out how they're doing. So please encourage open communication and listen to people. Don't judge, and encourage people to talk if they want to, if they need to. So could I just say that there's a simple toolkit to make it easy for people, and it works on algae, and it's about making an approach, listening, non-judgmentally, giving information and support. And key information is that these feelings that we have around our mental health and difficulties, they're so common. That's the one piece of information to give people. There's loads of help out there. More and more of it is online. I don't know if we can put some links in with this. I can supply you with those. There's some great resources at the minute through Mind Charity, NHS, loads of resources we can direct listeners and viewers to really help themselves at home. The Samaritans are always there in a crisis. But talking about suicide is key, and not judging anyone about that. If someone mentions suicide or uses language that suggests they have a very bleak future, there is no future, they're thinking about ending their own life, no one would miss them if they weren't here, really use your senses, be super sensitive to those at the moment. Those are things that we should be asking more about. If we're listening for those, ask some open questions. Make it okay to talk about suicide. If people can talk about it, get those emotions out there, it can be a massive turnaround for them, that they won't feel alone anymore. Those suicidal thoughts are surprisingly common. 20% of the population have them. 25% of emergency responders have said that they've thought about ending their own life. That's only the people that admitted it and actually said they had. It's probably a lot higher than that. So it's surprisingly common, but those thoughts are temporary. And they do pass. You don't have to act on them. There's always hope for recovery, and going and talking to someone you trust is great. And the Samaritans are there 24/7 as well on 116 123.
Brilliant. Andy, that's absolutely fantastic. And I think, like you said, a toolkit approach is great, because you can both use it on yourself and other people, to the point where you can just de-escalate situations, both in yourself and other people, because they're designed to be not necessarily a quick fix, but a quick de-escalation of something which needn't build up over time. And then you can start to let things go. I was talking to a colleague the other day, and one of the things, my biggest revelations, is learning just how to let things go, learning how to let conflict go, learning how to let situations go which didn't necessarily go the way I wanted them to, learning how to let failure go. That's a big one actually as well. And just learning how to let it all go, but while still learning from it, but learning how to let it go. So that toolkit approach is fantastic actually. So a couple more questions as we come into land, Andy, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One of them is just going to be where to find you, because I think this is really important information actually, and I think a lot of people need this information. So I want to really signpost them to you, because I think this mental health first aid is a vital component that we miss out. But before we land on that question, have you got any overarching messages you'd like to speak to the community of paramedics, doctors, nurses, pre-hospital and or in hospital at this time?
Thank you so much for what you're doing. I have the utmost respect for what you're doing day and daily, and that comes from everyone I'm in communication with. And Joe Public, thank you so much. We can you've never been more valued and well thought of, and I hope society changes and your worth is increased in our eyes exponentially, and I just cannot thank you enough and applaud you and celebrate the great work that you're doing. I send you patience, strength and determination to get through this. So I'm really trying through this period to put out free resources, simple messages to help people and direct people to get them through this tough time. And gosh, pulling together as a society, as friends, family, setting differences aside, there's never been a more important time for us. to do it. So please be gentle and kind to yourself and with others at home in lockdown and at work as well. Just taking that pause if something's really upsetting you, having a few deep breaths and getting back to it and focusing on what is right, not who is right, is really important. Let's work together.
Listen, Andy, that's absolutely fantastic, and all encompassing. Yeah, I really agree with all that, actually. So listen, this is really vital, and I, just through my own life can bear testimony to that, to everything you've just mentioned, actually, around mental health, first aid, and all the tools you're mentioning. So people can find you at andyelwood.com. Is that the main place? Can they find you on social media as well?
Yeah, all the social media is there. If you just go to andyelwood.com, the social media is there. Try and keep it simple.
Oh, fantastic. Listen, absolutely fantastic, Andy. And at this time, I think it's a massively important narrative and conversation to be having. So both thank you for your time and perspectives, Andy, and just for your work, because I think it's really important whilst we face this pandemic.
I think it's a key part. Our physical health is linked to our mental health. They have parity, and connection with others joins the two together in a bit of a health triangle. So please look after yourselves every day out there on the front line, and your loved ones at home. Doing the basics will work and get us through this, and we'll come out the other side together.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, and just thanks for your time today.
Okay, a pleasure being here. Thank you.